This is August the 21st, 2012, and we are here at the Parks and Open Space office of Boulder County, and we are interviewing Bob Buxton about his career with Parks and Open Space. I am Cheryl Kippen, the Cultural History Programs Coordinator, and we also have
Carol Beam, Historic Preservation Specialist.
And our camera person is?
I'm Kelly Pilger.
And then Bob, can you introduce yourself briefly and your position and all with Parks?
I'm Bob Buxton. I'm a ground supervisor for Parks and Open Space, and I've been here for about 28 years.
All right, and Bob, I think that we'll kind of go back a little bit and get a little bit of background from you on kind of how you got here and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, where were you born? We'll go all the way back there.
I was born in the town of Red Hill in Surrey, England in 1946.
And as a child in your household, who were your family members?
Two brothers, youngest John, 8 years younger than me, and Ralph, 4 years younger than me, and my parents, mom and dad.
And your parents' professions, what did they do?
Well, my dad started out farming, and then after he got out of that, or retired from it, he went into working for the government at Edwards Air Force Base in California as a greenskeeper, head groundskeeper for the golf course out there on the Air Force Base. And my mom was a housekeeper. What you did in the 50s.
What year did your family come to California, to the States then?
In 1951, they sailed from England on my 5th birthday and moved out of green England to the brown Mojave Desert. Kind of shock to my mom, I think. And we ended up on an alfalfa farm out in the middle of the desert. And it was like 25 miles to town for groceries once a week, and I kind of liked it. At 5 years old, what are you going to not like, run around like a wild man.
And where are some of the places that you've lived besides England and California?
Other than California, after I worked for the State Department of Water Resources in California for 13 years after I got out of the Marine Corps. And while in the Marine Corps, I served in the East Coast at Quantico, Virginia, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and at Camp Pendleton in California. And then I served in Vietnam for slightly over one tour. And then back to California. And from there, after 13 years with the state, I got a wild idea to go back and live in England to see what it was really like. So back in 1980, we upped stakes and moved to England. We lived there for 4 years, and I stayed there after my family came back here. I stayed there to sell the house and then followed them back here. We came to Colorado straight from England because my wife's brother lived here, and he was having some medical issues and stuff, so we came here to help take care of him and to just settle down here. And we liked the area. We've been through here before on trips out to Wyoming and saw that Colorado looked good, so we moved here in 1984 and been here ever since.
And as far as your education and training, what kinds of training have you gotten?
Training.
Yeah, or even your schooling, even as a child too.
Well, I went through school in rural schools out in California, in the same town, and we had a schoolhouse not far from our farm, so I went there initially, and then we moved into town later, and I went to high school at Antelope Valley Joint Union High School in Lancaster. Graduated from there and then went to junior college, and in my second year at junior college, let's just say I goofed off a little bit, and the old GPA wasn't what it was, and the draft was looming for Vietnam, and a friend of mine's father was a recruiter, and he and I both went down and enlisted with his dad in the Marine Corps. And then after that, after I got out of school, or after I got out of the Marine Corps, I went back to junior college and finished up. And then we had our first child, and that put an end to that school stuff. So I ended up getting a job with the state of California, and training-wise, as far as training with them, I had a lot of equipment operation training, a lot of surveying training, background in civil engineering, and then came here and then did a lot of intensive supervisory training, project management trainings, just basically building people skills, most of the trainings. And when I was in the Marine Corps, my training there was as a weapons specialist, as an armorer, so I went to school at Quantico. There's an OCS school there, and then there's a weapons training school there, and I was in the weapons platoon. where I learned to become an armorer, which in the civilian terminology would be a gunsmith, basically, for small arms. And that was there for a year, just over a year, about a year. And ran track at Quantico and enjoyed the heck out of that. That's it, training.
Very good. All right. And as far as your, coming and working in the grounds profession
Mhm.
and that sort of thing, do you have any idea about any hobbies, activities in your childhood and growing up, activities in your past, maybe even classes that you took that led you on that path, or even chores that you had when you were growing up?
I don't know that it was so much that, but I had a good friend that I went to high school with. His name was Joe Spragno. And Joe, we had several classes together, and I know after high school he went straight to work for the Los Angeles Parks and Recreation Department. And I ran into him again later years when I had kids and they were involved in the Parks and Rec program, and Joe told me how much he liked that. And I was in a natural resource field at that time too, with water resources, and although it was more, originally it was with the design and construction branch, and then later with the operations and maintenance branch of that after we built the California aqueduct system. And I liked the natural resources field, so I knew that once I got back from working in England, that I wanted to get back into that. So when I came here, I had 3 interviews, one with public service, one with the city of Boulder, and one with Boulder County, all on the same day. And I think I was unemployed for a week. And when I was offered the job with Boulder County, which was the Public Works Division at that time, I jumped on the job, and because I knew it was a natural resources field, and the other 2, the city, I'd heard reputations about their budgets and didn't particularly want to go there. And public service was not exactly what I wanted to work in, so I took the job with Public Works thinking to get into parks, and it worked out. After a year with Public Works, they had an opening in parks, and I applied and got it. So more of that than anything else.
Sure. And when you were in England, I can't remember if you discussed this or not, what type of work did you do when you were there?
Well, it was a little tough trying to find a job on the English job market in the 80s. It was pretty tight. Their economy was pretty poor, and the pound was quite a bit less than it is today. But it was the job field that I got into was with a company building equipment for the North Sea oil rigs. We would build fuel oil coalescer packages, and we would build heat exchangers, and we would have them either shipped or flown up to the North Sea in Scotland. We would then go on a helicopter out to the oil rigs, and either off the coast of Scotland or off the coast of Norway, and we'd install them, and then we'd come back and do it again. And occasionally they would have an opportunity to go down to Saudi Arabia, to Iran, which was still a functioning, viable country at the time. And we would, I was given the opportunity to go there, but traveling on an American passport, I wasn't about to do it, so I just went to north. I didn't go south. So we were building basically fuel oil coalescer packages, and it was basically to separate salt water from the oil. And we would be doing welding, fabrication, welding inspection, metallurgical work with heat and stress relieving of welded projects, and basically all that fabrication and inspection of those things. We'd use dye penetrant, and we'd use X-rays, and we'd use mag particle inspection techniques, and from one end to the beginning of the project, from raw materials till its installation and operation.
All right. Well, we will start now with your work for Boulder County Parks and Open Space. So done with the background, I think, and onward and forward. And I think we talked about this already, but when did you begin working for Boulder County Parks and Open Space?
Boulder County 1984, and with Parks Department in 85.
My first question.
Go for it.
All right. What positions have you held for Parks and Open Space?
The one I'm in now.
That's it?
Yep.
That's
I was
where
hired. The title has morphed, and the description has changed, but it's the same basic job as it was when I was hired. It was as a parks foreman, and then it became a parks. I believe it morphed into parks. I think you'd say parks foreman forever, and then just recently, about 5 years ago, it got changed to parks supervisor. and ground supervisor. The description of the work being done wasn't really changed a lot. It did get more specific as years went on. We started out, we had 2 crews. We all did the same thing. We built whatever it was to be built, whether it was doing private land management cuts up on private land in the forest for the county on private land and on public land, or we were building trails, or we were building a structure, or we were developing a new trailhead. It didn't matter. We all did the same stuff. We all did all of it. Then it became more specific later on as to breaking out job duties for each crew. One crew would do the construction facilities, one crew did trails, one crew did grounds and trailheads and planting of trees, and that's what we do now. So that's how I got broke out.
And what was your first day like? Do you recall?
With parks?
Mhm.
Yeah, I do. It's terrifying, to be honest with you, because I was handed a crew of people, and I'm sure Don will forgive me for saying this, but they were a little intimidating, because it was like one crew supervisor who was already here. His name was Jim Gabriels, and he had a way about him. He was very quiet, didn't say anything, and when he did, it was usually shouted. And he says, I want this person, and this person, you can have the rest. So it's like going to the ball game and saying, nobody wants Joey at the end here, so you take him. So that's what I ended up with a crew of people with Steve LaRue, Don Bird, Scott Langton, and I don't know if there was anybody else on the original, but I do have an original 1980, well, close to original, 1988 roster of people. I also had Ron Smaggett, who was another original one, and later on I was given a guy who worked at the fairgrounds named Neil Swedberg, and that was it. That was my crew.
Who has been your most challenging employee to supervise, if we talk a little bit about crews?
You want a name?
If you'd like, or if you'd
Doesn't
like to
bother
just
me.
describe, that's fine too. What do you think, Carol?
Steve LaRue. You don't even have to answer, Carol.
Hands down.
Hands down, the most challenging employee.
For many reasons.
Mhm.
You don't have to go into detail.
Do you want me to or not?
It's up to you.
He was just a hard person to keep track of. His job description was to go out and clean the bathrooms, haul trash away from the park, so he was out on his own most of the time. He also had the job of working community service workers on Saturdays, which didn't work so well. He had a lot of responsibility, and I guess when you let people go early, when they're giving court orders to be there to do something, you sort of countermand a judge's order, and that didn't work. So he got in trouble for that. But he was constantly somebody you had to ride. You had to make sure he did his job. You had to remind him of everything, and he would always claim, "Oh, you never told me that." So you end up having to put everything in writing, and it got to be kind of tedious. And it was big, it was like the problem child. You had to spend a lot more time with him than with the good people who were doing their job. So that became a pain. But other than that, they were a pretty good bunch most of the time.
Well, as we all know, Parks and Open Space has changed and grown significantly since you first came
Mhm.
here in '85. And so tell us some of the places that you were housed over the years before we came to our final headquarters here. So share with us where you've
Yeah.
been stashed.
Well, the first place, when I started working for Parks, there were 3 facilities for Parks. One was downtown at the courthouse annex, where Carolyn had her office, and before her, Ben Green was there. And then we had one facility out of Walden Ponds, with the A-frame that's no longer there. And that was where the rangers and resource management people were housed. And then we had one site for the rest of us, and that was at Lee Hill in a garage at the Lee Hill Road Maintenance Shop. And it's now it became a parts room after we moved out of there, and now it's, I think, abandoned. Maybe the sheriff's department may use it for storage right now. But that's where we were based out of when I started, at the shop at Lee Hill. And we had a shared restroom facility with road maintenance, and we had a separate little cubby hole with 2 offices in the back and a wood burning furnace for heat, and a small one bay shop that we did repairs to equipment in. And after I was there for about a year, Jim Gabriels left as one of the foremen. He left, and then Barry Shook was hired over from the resource management group to become the other foreman. That's where we were to start with. And from there we went to Walden Ponds. We moved into a portion of the road maintenance building that they had abandoned. We moved into that and rebuilt it as a shop for us. We built a carpentry shop and crew rooms and offices and a welding shop and a sign shop. So that was where we were for a lot of years until I think the biggest hassle for us was having people scattered all over the county. We had people there, we had people at the fairgrounds, we had people at Walden, or at the office downtown. And then it sort of morphed even further afield. We ended up with our supervisor being stationed out at Gun Barrel. And so it got to be a headache to try and keep up with everybody. So we started lobbying pretty strongly, and I was pretty vocal about us trying to get into one facility. And I didn't care where it was, but it needed to be sort of centrally located. And I think it made a big difference for us when we finally got permission to build this site and move everybody together. I know some people didn't like it because access became easier to people and they couldn't dodge the bullet so easily, but I think it was a big benefit to the department. It helped a lot, and sort of, I don't know where it'll go from here, but I think having everybody in one site's the best thing.
I agree.
And at those different office areas and locations, about how many people have you supervised over the years, do you think, Bob?
Gosh, I don't know. I had some employees that were here for, well, Don's still here. I don't supervise him anymore. Scott Langton was here 18 years. Neil Swedberg was probably here with me for probably 10 or 12 years. Steve LaRue was here for way too many years. And Jeff Cox, who's taking my position over now, has been here for 12 years. The rest of them are a little bit shorter term that we have now. We've got some new young people in the crew that are really good, and it's a godsend having them on the crew to get their ideas and new ways of looking at things. But Al Hardy is still here, and I was amused the other day thinking back on how many of the people that were here now started as seasonals. And I couldn't begin to tell you how many seasonals I've had over the years. There's probably 100 or more seasonals. And there's a lot of people that are in the department, in all phases of the department, that started out on maybe the trails crew or on our crew. I mean, I can think of several on the trails crew now that are the forestry crew. Started here as trail seasonals, Chad being one of them, and along with quite a few others. But yeah, I couldn't tell you how many seasonals we've had, and I'll total the number of employees, I don't know. Some a long time, though. Some people stayed for a long time. Turnover in our department was not something noteworthy for quite a while, until we started expanding.
Well, you've talked about the multitude of people you supervised over the years. Talk to us about the fun parts of supervising of people.
Mm-hmm.
We can ask the other question next, but let's start with what's the fun part of supervising people? There's got to be some positive experiences. Well,
I think the fun part for me was learning new things. I mean, hiring young people at first seemed like a pain in the neck because, you know, you had to train them. You had to start with the bare bones, spend a lot of time with them. But that in itself also became good because if you're willing to be open to it, you learn more yourself. You learn as much as they learn. And new ways of looking at things, new way of approaching problems. And I'm a firm believer in the idea that it doesn't matter how you solve a problem. If you get the results you're looking for and nobody gets hurt doing it, you have a good time on the job, and you enjoy your work. You come to work each day, don't dread it. You're having fun. You're going to have a good day at work. You're going to enjoy what you did. And you're going to look back at the end of the day or at the end of the project and say, hey, we did that. And it's a benefit to the county. It's a benefit to the people who use the parks. And I've been fortunate having a lot of people that look at it that same way. So I think that's the best part for me. That's the part you take away. You got to have something in your job that makes it worth doing. And that's it, I think.
Good.
And so the fun part, what's the flip side of that? What are some challenges and difficulties with being a supervisor?
Being a priest, being a confidant, being a daycare provider, all the negative sides of it. Writing employee evaluations is probably the worst thing, the hardest thing to do. Logistics and physical problems, those I actually think of those as fun because I like problem solving. But it's the people getting along, and that's 95% of it. If you got a group of people that work well together as a team, the rest of it comes naturally. It's getting people who may or may not want to do that and trying to change and correct that. That's the part that's the hardest.
I think those of us who know you rarely see you in the office, so this question, we're just gonna have to roll with it in terms of indoor and outdoor
Mhm.
workspace, which your indoor workspace doesn't see a lot of you in the
Mhm.
chair. Which locations have you enjoyed the most?
Well, obviously being outdoors, because I'm most comfortable there. I like being out on the ground, solving problems, and working with people. I don't know how you guys do it indoors. I don't really know. I get bored. I get, probably because most of the work that I do indoors involves writing evaluations, dealing with contracts, dealing with things that aren't my favorite cup of tea. There are things you have to do, but they're not my favorite side of it. So yeah, definitely outdoors. Anything that involves, even if it's something nasty for Cheryl that she wants to drag back here and put in a museum, I'd rather go do that than be in here.
Let's see. Has there been a work location or work locations that have brought more challenges than others, and why?
It's a good question. Yeah, I know back quite a few years ago, one of our duties used to be the first people on the ground on the property after acquisitions would buy it. And there was no consideration back then given to making the seller clean up the property. So we would get tasked, along with doing CIP projects and O&M projects, we would get tasked with having to go in there and clean those new acquisitions before people would get onto them. And a lot of times they were pretty nasty. And one example was the Brawley property. It took us almost 4.5 months just to clean that one up, and that was with the entire crew working on it for 4.5 months. And it was basically they had a landfill in their backyard, and there's a lot of hazardous materials, a lot of dealing with old appliances and asbestos and nasty things, unknown mystery chemicals. But those were the things that we probably didn't like as much. But along the flip side of that was that we would usually get tasked with the demolition of if there was a house or a structure on it, we would do those. And those were our aggression release, because our crew got to the point where they could take sledgehammers and demolish a house and have it in roll-offs in 2 days. Yeah, that was fun. You don't get to wreck stuff very often, but when you do, it was fun. But I think the best part of it, though, was actually, for me personally, was getting out and doing probably Hall Ranch, doing the initial survey. We hired a company named Tor Engineering to come in and do the survey. They would find the corner points, and then I would go in afterwards and put in the intervisible points in between all those corner points. And I spent one whole summer doing that up there. I'd pack everything around with me and do it by myself, and that was fun. So I like surveying and like doing land surveys, and they were interesting to me, and it was a little bit of a challenge. You had to remember all those math skills and trigonometry that you forgot about when you left college, and you had to remember all that stuff. So it was fun. I like that.
I'm going to deviate from the printed questions because you brought up a good point that many people didn't know, that in the good old days, how you were tasked with, after a recent acquisition, to go out and clean it up. I know I've heard some stories about Walker and Harney-Listoka. Can you just share a few brief special places besides Brawley? I didn't know Brawley was a trash
was
dump.
bad one,
So
yeah.
share with us a couple more about some of the special places and what you found.
There's a small drainage on Rock Creek, which held an enormous dump. We had to clean that up one year, and it was just southeast of the Birds of Prey hospital facility out there. And then another good one was the Gage property. It has a huge dump on it on the mesa behind the house to the southwest of the house. That took months to clean up too. It was, most of these farmers never threw anything away. They just put it in the backyard and left it there. And they were pretty notorious. We've even found explosives in that one, munitions. We found 3.5-inch bazooka rockets. We found hand grenades. You name it, it's been in them. And another good one was Mud Lake, with the mine sites up there that had been used as landfill dumps for years by the locals, and so those were pretty tough to clean up. And we did the initial cleanup, and then we had my land reclamation board come in and fill them. And I noticed that there's a few more that have popped up, that have opened up over the years. Since about a month ago, I was up there and saw a couple more that probably need to be taken care of. Yeah, there's a few goodies out there in our pristine wilderness.
Yeah.
Which is your favorite park, do you think?
I don't know. Some of them hold a lot of good memories. I know doing the first Walker Ranch Days programming and the fall programming at Walker Ranch was fun. First one we did, and that was interesting, enjoyable. That got me into doing that. I did it for several years, probably 15 years after that. That was good. I like Walker Ranch. It's got a lot of neat stuff up there, and it's got a lot of interesting wildlife and landscape. Hall Ranch, because I got to do the surveying on that one. That's an interesting place too. Caribou, Mud Lake. But I would have to say that the best ones are all in the mountains for me. I like mountain property as opposed to the plains, but there are some really nice farms down here on this side that are interesting to look at and get the history of the people. As far as that goes, the people on the ground do make it interesting. There's a couple of characters that are farmers for us that have been here for most of their lives, and I can think of a couple of them right now. One of them's Dick Tanaka over at Highway 52 and 287. He's a great person and really interesting. He can teach a lot. And there's a couple of others over at the Clark Farm. That's another interesting place. Got a lot of history associated with it. We got to do a lot of work on the buildings there when we still did building maintenance and stuff. Isaac Dreith, the farmer there, is, if you get the chance to interview him, I don't know if you have or not, but he's worth every penny.
So we're all subject to a budget, and I know there's been ups and downs in the budget over the years, and once you got involved with supervising and budget management, I mean, what have been some of the surprises in terms of how your budget's come and gone over the years?
Well, yeah, when I started here, our budget for our group that did the work that we do, like the type of work that we do now, that we were doing at Lee Hill with two crews doing it, was about the same as it is now for my crew.
Wow.
So our budget was about 60,000 then. My budget right now this year is about 68 to 70,000, right in that range. Hasn't gone up that much. And the reason for that is that that budget is utilized for O&M projects only now. It used to be used for everything back then. Now it is used only for O&M. So with capital improvement projects, they're all separate budgets. So we do a lot of work out of that. We do matching funds with grant projects. So utilizing our budget just simply for O&M and the things we need on a day-to-day basis, we can do that out of that 67,000. We don't need the additional money because the major capital improvement projects are coming out of a separate budget, tax funds in most cases, or bond monies. So it hasn't hurt us in our budget. We still managed to get everything done and within budget every year.
Great.
That we're assigned. Sometimes
Right.
we don't get them in time. They aren't planned or aren't finalized.
And along with changes in budget and surprises with that, we talked a little about this earlier, but maybe you can expand on it. How has the department changed over the years? And what kinds of things have been surprising, and maybe what sorts of things not surprising?
I don't think I ever, coming into the department, ever realized that it would grow this much. May have been naivety, but on this chart here, there were 28 people in the department. There were less than that when I started. I don't have one from 1985, but I do have 1988. There were 28 of us in the whole department. The real estate section and the planning group are the ones that have grown the most, and I think, along with our operations and maintenance and the rec and facilities division. We didn't have a fire or forestry section. It was sort of doled out to everybody. I mean, the Rangers did it, we did it, we all had a role to play in it. And now we're separate sections, separate divisions, and what are we now, 130 some people. So that's where I see a big change in the department. And for me, I think that the acquisitions group probably was one of the biggest instruments. That having to have that many people to do the acquisition was a good thing we did, because we acquired so much more land then. I think we only had a handful of properties when I started, at the most, and now I couldn't begin to tell you all the names of the properties we have here. For a long time, I did know them all, not anymore.
Well, looking back
Mhm.
over your years at Parks, why did you stay so long?
Because I like it.
Yeah.
I like doing this work. I like the people. It's a good organization and has its head and its heart in the right place. And you can walk away, like I said before, you can walk away at the end of the day and feel like you've actually accomplished something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that matters to the taxpayers of the county, it matters to the employees here, and it matters to the people who use the properties. And to get all of that in any job, I don't think you can do it. I don't think you could anywhere else, from my perspective, because this is what I like to do. If I'm not here working on a property, I'm out here recreating on one on the weekends or on, whenever. So I've taken advantage of it to some extent too, to utilize it on my time off.
So you feel you go away with a good job satisfaction?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could have continued on building pressure vessels for 28 years and then walked away at the end going, wow, that was worthwhile, because I don't think it was. But I think anything in the natural resources field, whether it's wildlife biology or botany or building parks or whatever, I think it's important to do it. And I think I grew up in Southern California, and I saw what happened there. When I was a kid, I moved to the Antelope Valley where we lived. The population of the entire valley was something like 35,000 people. And when I left in 1980, the population was 1.8 million. And when I came back, the population of one of the towns was 1 million in that valley.
Mhm.
So it's huge now. And the area where my folks used to farm is wall-to-wall subdivisions.
Hmm.
The areas where my brothers live is wall-to-wall subdivisions. And it used to be rural, very rural. There used to be antelope there.
Hmm.
That's why I got the name it did, Antelope Valley. There used to be artesian wells on the surface of the desert out there. Now, when my dad sold his area, his farming area, when he got out of it, I think originally they were drawing water from 200 feet. When they sold off, they were pulling water from over 4,000 feet with diesel pumps,
Hmm.
because they drained the aquifer. And they overpopulated everything there. So I felt good about coming to an organization that's preserving land and conserving land, as opposed to letting it all be developed.
Mhm.
I think that's important for any society.
In terms of doing grounds work and the kind of work that you do, how do you train others to do that kind of work, such as the seasonals,
Mhm.
such as youth corps members that you might work with, maybe even volunteer groups that might come
Mhm.
in?
Well, I think I'll use youth corps as an example. We've had a youth corps crew every year since they've had the youth corps here on our crew. And we have, at the beginning of the season, when they come on, we take them out and we show the leaders, the ones that are going to be the team leaders, what we intend to do that year. We spend a day with them just showing them what we're going to do. And in a lot of cases, they may or may not, because they're leaders, they may or may not have worked in that before, so they have a little bit of an idea. And then we spend time with them when they get the crews there and they are on board. We explain to them what we want. We work with them. And I learned something from a Marine general a long time ago, is that you cannot push a chain, or push a chain, you have to pull it. And what his point was, you have to lead from the front. And so you have to be willing to get in there and get with them and work with them and to show them how to do it, not just tell them how to do it, because you'll never get anywhere doing that. And the same goes for new employees, the same goes for volunteer groups, which are another entity altogether, because you're going to get a very diverse group of people with volunteers and various experience levels and skill levels and skill sets. So the more time you can spend working with them and showing them what you get a lot more bang for your buck, and you get the learning curve is that much reduced. So I believe that's key to it, is teaching them hands-on, one-on-one with them, showing them how to do it, not just telling them, go out and do this and take what you get. You don't get much when you do that.
You've talked about training these types of groups, but
Mhm.
how have the youth corps and the volunteer groups changed over the years? I mean, they had to have a starting point. You had to have seen
Mhm.
that starting point and where they are, how important they are to parks
Oh, yeah.
today.
Today, one of the key things, just today, one of my employees asked me for some figures, help put together some figures for our youth corps crew this year as to how much cost savings they were to us over the year. And it was roughly $15,000 they saved us by the work they did this year. So right there's a chunk, and that's just one crew, and there's multiple crews in our organization. But volunteers, I mean, the number of volunteer hours in this department now, I mean, last year was probably the peak so far. I don't know that this year's will match last year's, but the work we get done with that, we wouldn't be able to do it in 10 years in staff if we didn't have the volunteer groups, and particularly with things like trails and where you need mass numbers of labor. And I think they're the key to the future of this department. Youth corps, volunteers, I think they're key. Because we're not going to get another quadrupling of staff here. It's not going to happen.
And in terms of projects, maybe routine and maybe not so routine, what are your favorite tasks and projects?
Right now, anything involving civil engineering, trying to get their heads around a project. The best part, the most interesting part, I think, is when we're handed a new project and we're given the drawings and we sit down with them, we put our heads together and we go, okay, this makes sense. What was that architect thinking when he drew this? Why this doesn't make sense? This does, and then going back to them with the drawings and getting it corrected, so that you do that work up front, so that when you go to do the project, you don't have these problems down the road, or things don't match, or a lot of things don't come together the way they should if you don't do that. So I think I like doing that part of the job. I also like the hands-on, on the ground problem solving with the crew, trying to get from A to B on a daily basis. Also like working with other groups within our department, not just my own. Some of the best days we've had have been when we've all gone out and done all staff projects. We get everybody together from the department, we go do a mass planting, and we plant 200 trees in a day or something. Those are fun, because you can walk away then and you can really see a difference at the end of the day, and you can see what large numbers of people will do.
How about challenging tasks or projects, routine or not routine?
Anything that involves water quality or water issues usually are a challenge. When you've got a problem with a damaged gate at the bottom of a dam, by gate I'm talking water release type gate that's underwater, and we've had some really beautiful ones. One out at Stearns Lake years ago where we had to actually winch the gate out of the dam, drain the dam through it, cut the dam in half, remove a chunk of it, and rebuild it. Another one over Rapella that's probably still ongoing right now. We had to hire people to come in and dive on it, then dive underwater in the middle of winter, a chainsaw through the ice, put divers in dry suits, and they went down and videoed the problem, brought it back up. We looked at the videos, we figured out how to solve it, and I know that one's ongoing though, because there's going to have to be a complete new structure put in there, because it was only a temporary fix. But those things are a challenge. And they never happen when it's convenient. They always happen when you're up your ears in another project or it's in the dead of winter. But I think for me the biggest frustration is being handed a project that requires earthwork, and you're given it in December. That's your start date, and the ground's frozen. And you have to gently explain to people that that may or may not be done on time because of that, and it's hard getting that across to some folks. Timeliness is key when you're doing earthwork, not being handed a project in the middle of winter to build a new trailhead at Fulton Road.
In one of your previous responses, you talked about how important you think it is for us to preserve and conserve our natural resources. So building upon that, how do you think other communities or people you've come in contact with think of the Boulder County Parks and Open Space Department as a model, a leader?
I had the opportunity to be in an interview for a previous boss of mine. I think I've gone through 5 now. And one of the interviewees said that he knew about us and what we did because he read about us in a Parks and Open Space journal, which rated us the #2 Parks Department in the country. And that's how he heard about us, and that's how he heard about when he saw the job posted online and why he was interested in applying for it. And I've heard that from a couple of different sources over the years, and I thought that that speaks well for where the county commissioners and our directors over the years have headed the department, and the quality that they've expected out of it, and the quality people that work here are represented by that national status. And I think that they have, we earned that reputation. And all of us in this department earned it. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, but it begs the question for me, who was number one if we were number two?
I heard that it was South Bay in San Francisco area.
Huh.
South Bay Parks, I think it was number
Well,
one.
we'll have to go after them.
We may have overlapped them though by now. That was probably 10 years ago.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah,
Great.
I hope so.
Can I ask another one?
Certainly.
Yeah. Building upon how you think that Boulder County Parks and Open Space is a leader, do you think we're continue to head in the right direction now that this acquisition, the feeding frenzy is pretty much over in terms of what's out there to buy? Do you still think we're heading in the right direction?
Well, I think we're headed in the right direction, but I'm not so sure the feeding frenzy is over. I've been hearing that since I started here, that, we're winding down, there's not that much land left to sell. And it seems like every time we turn around, we get another opportunity presents itself with a whole new set of challenges. I noticed with the latest Heil acquisition, that'll change a lot of dynamics up there. But yeah, I think we're headed the right direction. I think we don't think like 18 different people anymore. We think as a group now. We work together more in teams and work closer with the planners. We work closer with acquisitions, and I think that tends to focus our attention. And I don't think we're out of buying money yet. I don't think it will ever end.
Right?
In terms of projects, maybe, or in terms of things that you had to purchase for projects, either one. What's the most unusual project or unusual item, or both, that you've had to purchase?
Well, I don't know if you'd call it a purchase. We had to bury somebody one time. That was up there. The coroner's office had a corpse of a transient that had been in storage for 2 years, and they were unable to identify him. And they found out that the coroner's office owned 3 or 4 grave sites over in the Burlington Cemetery on southwest Longmont. And so they decided to have the Public Works at that time, Public Works Department, build a coffin. And then they called us and asked us to come over and dig the grave with a backhoe. And so we met a gentleman from the cemetery district who had walked around with 8.5 by 11 and said, yeah, this place here is good, there's nobody in there. So we dug down, and sure enough, we hit a coffin, opened it up with the backhoe. And so we quickly reburied that person, and then we moved over and we dug the grave and buried this fellow. I think that was probably the weirdest job I've ever had here. But we did get a nice letter from the coroner's office. Not sure that made it worthwhile, but
Well, you talked about that unusual situation. We'll continue with that thought. What's the most expensive thing you ever bought, you had to buy for a project?
Gosh, expensive. I don't know. As far as an object, it would be fairly well down the list, but just purchasing equipment, tractors, equipment, that sort of thing, probably the most expensive. Contract-wise, though, we sent out some pretty expensive contracts for engineering services for tour engineering to have them come up and do Heil, put in those corners up, Hall rather, when they put in those corners was a couple $100,000 project because they decided that they could do it with GIS and helicopters rather than on the ground. And it was it was worth the money. They weren't the cheapest bidder. They were like the second or third from the top. But we knew they had the engineering and the equipment to do it, and they could do it in time. So we went with them anyway. And they came with a good recommendation from Andy Reed, who was one of the county surveyors down at worked for engineering and transportation. And we went with them. It might have been the single most expensive contract, but there was some equipment-wise would probably be the most expensive things: backhoes, tractors, that sort of stuff. I would say, maybe in the range of $60,000, $80,000, $100,000.
And in terms of equipment and/or expertise, how far away have you had to look for different kinds of equipment expertise? Have you had to reach out all over the world, or?
We've been fortunate that we had some really good skilled people, the operators here within staff. I mean, that's what I did when I worked for Water Resources, what I've done here. Jeff Cox has done equipment work all his life. Neil Swedberg, when he was here, he did. Jeff Shaw is a great equipment operator. We haven't had to go too far afield for that type of work, but I did request that we try and develop an O&M computer program for us that would give us, would come up on a routine basis, and it would kick it out of a computer saying this needs to be done this week, this month, this year, XYZ, for whatever facility you have on the park system. And we heard that there was such a system in existence, and it was with the Tennessee Valley Authority at Barkley State Resort in Kentucky. And so I convinced the director, Carolyn, at the time, to send a couple of us out there to go to school there and learn that system, which was an antiquated D-based system, and it was a nightmare. And we got through the course all right. We managed to survive it and learn some of it, but then it was a little frustrating when we got back here and found out that IT wouldn't support it, so it went bye-bye. Then it was for nothing. But that was probably as far afield as we've had to go to get, you know, some resource out of somebody. I have talked to people on the phone in Australia and in New Zealand to get information about a particular tool that was made there, you know, for replacement purposes and stuff. But most of it, in this day and age, most stuff now you can get on the internet and find anything and everything. So and it's simplified our lives a lot, complicated it a lot too, but something else.
In terms of either equipment or people or any type of widget or gadget, what's the most difficult thing you had to acquire?
Good question. I don't know. We've had, for different reasons, sometimes it was hard to convince people that it was something we actually needed. And for other things, it was like we just couldn't find anything that we needed to do something. So we've got fairly inventive about fabricating our own stuff when we needed things like that. Whether it be specialized lifting mechanisms, or we had a problem at the Loggerman dock this year where ice flow this last winter shoved the dock off of its mounts, which are pipes augured into the soil base underneath the lake, and it basically, the ice flow just shifted, it bent the pipes over, the dock came off of it, so, and the pipes were bent and underwater, so we had to figure out how to get them out of there. So we thought about it a little bit, and then I came up with the idea of, and the idea came from a fishing lure, because I have a couple of lures in my tackle box that are sort of they're in an L shape with a slight, not 90 degrees, but slight angle to them. And I thought they pull at an angle. So I thought, well, if we made a plate up that was shaped like that, only heavy duty, like 3/4 of an inch thick and this long with a bend in it, huge hole on this end, small hole on this end, stick the big end over the pipe, put the winch line on the other end, it would bite into the pipe and pull it out of the ground without slipping off of it. And it worked.
Wow.
It was just dumb luck. But those are the kind of things that make your day. But it was, you know, we couldn't find one anywhere, so we decided to make it ourselves. We've been in that predicament several times where either myself or Jeff Cox or Jeff Shaw have come up with ideas to resolve problems. And it's like they say, you know, necessity being the mother of invention, and it's worked for us several times. We went to a job fair, or not a job fair, but an equipment expo in Denver, and we saw a piece of equipment that we've been trying to figure out in our heads how to make it. We looked at it, and we thought, start sketching some figures, guesstimating some lengths, go back to the shop and make it. One time we decided that it was something we needed in a hurry, so we actually purchased one from somebody down there. But I'm pretty good at doing that, going into a store and looking at something and then design it, draw it up, rough sketch, and then go back and make it. So, and that's gotten me into furniture making from that. I like doing that. I'll go into a store, see something I like, sketch it, and then go home and make it. So it's fun. And then apply the same thing here, and it becomes a fun day making it. So.
Sure.
And then especially when you see it work. If it doesn't work, you got to go back and do it a few more times. It becomes so much fun. But I don't know what else I would say about anything odd like that we would have purchased. But there's probably been some things over the years. Don might remember a few.
During your time at Parks and Open Space here, there have been changes in technology, changes in the internet, email, the ways that we can communicate with each other. What words do you have to say about that, and how do you welcome that or not?
Oh yeah, I think when we started here, we didn't have computers, we didn't have cell phones. They didn't exist, at least not on a scale that would be usable at work. And I remember when we got our first cell phones, it was like science fiction. They were, big, about that tall, maybe that tall, and they didn't fold. And I remember I ran over mine after having it for about 6 months because I left it on the hood of the truck while I was surveying, and then I drove off and then realized what had happened and went back and found it sitting in the tire tracks. But we got our first computers, I want to say around late 80s, early 90s. We got our first, I think it was late 80s, actually 88 or 89, when we were still at the Lee Hill facility, and they were pretty antiquated and arcane. But that has helped so much in being able to communicate with one another. Although I still feel more comfortable with face-to-face communication with people than I do with unreadable text where you don't know what the person is actually implying by their facial expressions. And I would prefer that, face-to-face, and then I would prefer voice, and then I would prefer email. But originally we communicated back and forth via radio when we were on job sites. We were all on the same network as road district, so you had to fight to get on the radio because usually the road maintenance people were on there discussing what they had done that weekend and how their vacations were, and it got to be kind of interesting during a couple of emergencies when we needed access to the radio. But they've really helped us in a lot of other ways, in particular with fire, because I was on the wildland fire team for, close to 20 years until I figured I was too old to do it anymore. And communication there was critical and it was important, and the new backset radios that we have access to now are light years ahead of everything we've ever had in the past. So those make it, people's lives depend on them, so I think it's important. And the more communications you have, the better things get, I think. It's all about communication, and any mode that works is fine by me.
We've talked about some of the projects you've worked on over the years, and the challenges and the rewards that each one has provided. I don't know if you did specify what's been the most challenge. If you had to pick one, what's been the most of those that have challenged you for any particular reason?
Been a couple. The first time we built the first shelter at Walker Ranch, which was located where more or less where the Myers Gulch trailhead is now, not up where the actual picnic shelter is, but below it. We built all the trusses, we hand built all the trusses at the Walker Ranch facility, at the barn, down by the pig barn. And we laid them out on relatively flat ground, and it was kind of a nightmare trying to get them built so that they were well constructed and tight tolerances. And we had Bernie Weisgerber here at the time, and he was a stickler for doing everything by wilderness standards, not using power equipment. And we did a lot of hand work, chiseling and rod axes. But we were doing it in the middle of winter, and we were laying up there in the snowbank doing them. And you go in, you do it for like a half an hour, you have to run in the cabin and heat up before you go back out again. And we did that for months up there, and it was satisfying seeing it built at the end and getting to build the whole thing from the ground up and roofing it and doing everything. And that was a fun project. It was a lot of work. I learned a lot because that'd been the first time I ever did any actual timber work, and I liked it. It was fun. Another one that was a challenge was, for a different reason, was Colton Road Trailhead.
Which was recently.
Yeah, last year. We spent all year building it last year. It took a long time, and part of the reason for that was it was a bum design off the bat, and none of us were able to pick up on that at the initial phase of looking at the drawings and seeing what needed to be done there, and it would call for a deep swale to be cut. And around the entire west and northern portions of the perimeter of the park parking lot. And the more we got into it, the more we started looking at the infrastructure outside of that and seeing the buried fiber optics lines from Rocky Flats, which would have been really fun to have cut, or the 12-inch high-pressure gas main on the other side, that was dead cert in line with the bottom of that trench. We had to go back and hire a new engineer and have a redesign. Instead of doing a swale, we did a berm. So we had to fill all of that, 2 months worth of work in and start over. And that's why it took so long to finish that project. That and the ground conditions out there were terrible. The weather conditions year-round were terrible. It was red hot and wind blowing all summer and freezing cold and snow and wind all winter. So it made for, and there's no protection out there, so it was a pretty bleak site. But it came out good in the end. I mean, it was a big improvement to the place and probably the best thing out there now.
Okay, I've heard we have about 5 minutes left. Let's maybe try for one more question, and then we'll decide if we want to go to another tape or what we want to do.
Sure.
So, over the years, what has been your most memorable moment or moments here at Parks?
Dang. Might be right now. I don't know. Gosh, memorable moment at Parks. Golly.
You'll be seeing them all on Thursday.
Yeah, I know.
At the
What's got
party.
me worried, yeah.
Maybe that will be your most memorable moment,
Yeah.
Thursday.
I don't know. I don't know. I've been involved in some pretty nasty things in parks that were pretty hair-raising that I didn't enjoy. One was stumbling onto an accused murderer in one of our properties and walking up not knowing it was him, what was going on. And I was working on the site and I saw a gentleman sitting on near a pond at Walden, and I thought, well, when I'm going by, I'll just say hi to him, because, you talk, people say hi, how you doing? I got within about 50 feet of him, and I heard somebody yell from behind me, Bob, get down, and it was like 5 or 6 sheriff's officers running towards me with their weapons drawn. So I hit the deck, and they went past me and tackled this guy, and he had, within a couple of hours previous, murdered a woman and stole some property from her. And he pulled a knife when the cops got near him, and he attempted to kill them, then he attempted to kill himself, and they managed to subdue him, and he's doing about 3 life sentences down in Canyon City right now. So, and to find out he was a former county employee didn't help any. But not with us, he was with the fairgrounds. That was probably the worst one.
But memorable.
Memorable, nonetheless. Unfortunately, it's a negative. I could give you a positive probably too, and that's probably any time we can work with the public in the project, doing volunteer work. Those are fun. I don't care which one it is; they're all fun. You have a lot of good people out there in the community that want to pitch in and help. Whether it's cleaning up a creek or cleaning up a property or planting trees or planting an orchard somewhere or whatever we're doing there, or building a trail. Those are fun. Those are probably the positive side.
All right, what do we think? Will we conclude? Do we want to go on to another tape? What do you guys think?
Whatever you want to do.
Was there anything you'd like to add to the
Yes.
questions that we didn't touch on that you would like to share before the tape
Gosh,
runs out?
I can't think of it. My mind's whizzing right now, but give me an hour after we're done and I'll come up with all kinds of stuff.
Well, we can call you back.
It's fine.
Yeah. After all the
I'd be happy
excitement
to.
of
If
your.
there's something silly comes to my mind, I'll
Yeah.
reiterate it to you.
Okay, I think we're good. Yes. Thank you very much, Bob.
You're welcome.
I think we're going to include your organizational
You can
chart
have both.
from-
There's an org chart there, and there's
Okay.
also a phone list
All right.
from that same era with people's birthdays on it. God knows why those were on the phone list at the time, but then there was only that many people in the department, so you could put it all on one sheet, so it didn't matter.
We'll put that with your consent form then,
Yeah,
and
you can
maybe
have those.
also a current org chart to do some comparison.
Yeah, that'd be fine. One word that I would like to say, and that is probably the biggest thing that's helped this department get where it is today, is the tax initiatives. And if it wasn't for those, we probably wouldn't have half the property we have or have a department the size of what we have. And I'm no preservationist, but I am a conservationist. And I think that's important, that we utilize any resources we have on our properties to the best and betterment of what properties we have. As an example, we have a hundreds of tons of stone laying on the surface of the ground at Steamboat Mountain. Then we pay for stone every year to build walls, to build trail corridors, to build parking areas and stuff. I think if that stuff is already mined, which it is, and it's sitting on the surface, we ought to be able to take that off there and utilize it and save the taxpayers some more money. And make use of a resource that's already been damaged. And clear the site, and then make it easier for revegetation and restoration later. And I think there's several sites like that, not just Steamboat. Hall 2 comes to mind too. But, yeah, those would be important to do, I think. My last sales pitch.
One before you go.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cut.